Hello everyone, this is Jacob Hobio, the producer of The Apex. In this episode, Jan and RJ interview Shahrad Daraeikia. Shahrad spends some time talking about his journey to becoming a scientist at the forefront of innovation in the biotech industry. This journey involved changing majors from pre-med to pre-pharmacy, followed by the decision to go to graduate school for something completely different on the other side of the country. Instead, Shahrad opted to attend graduate school at the University of San Francisco in pursuit of a master's in science in biotechnology. Shahrad then encountered Jake Glanville, CEO of Distributed Bio, and became an intern at the company and has since grown into a position that required him to directly impact the revolutionary techniques being utilized to discover and engineer powerful antibodies to help fight against the global pandemic. Check out Distributed Bio here at www.distributedbio.com. If you want to support us, there are 3 ways to do so. One is to donate to our cause at www.patreon.com/theapexpodcast. Second, visit our merch line that is proudly partnered with Envision Clothing Company at envisionclothingcompany.com. The final one is completely free. All we ask is if you learn something from this episode or know someone that needs to hear our message, share with them. Please subscribe and hope this pushes you toward your apex.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Apex Podcast. As always, I am your host, Jan Almasy, and because we are still in quarantine, unfortunately, I do not have the privilege of sitting across the table from my wonderful co-host, Mr. RJ Holiday, but he is here in spirit.
Yes, always. How are you, Jan? Also, turn your camera back on so this poor man doesn't have to talk to himself across the internet.
Well, I didn't want to try to mess up the feed. We've had so many issues already. But I guess I'll let him engage in human-to-human conversation.
There you go. See?
Two map dots. Okay, so my question for you, RJ, what are some things that are driving you crazy right now being stuck inside of the house?
I've eaten all my snacks.
All of them?
All my snacks are effectively gone. I have to go back outside, terrified for my life.
First world problems.
No, it's kind of disheartening now learning that last night they extended the quarantine and all that to what did he say, the 30th?
Yeah.
Is it the 30th? So, my family always gets together basically every holiday. There's 25 to 35 of us that always get together and do something for Christmas. And I know my aunt had her birthday last week and her grandkids came and sang to her from the porch through the front window. And then all 15 and 20 of us got on a FaceTime call and sang her happy birthday, and she cried her eyes out. And that stuff's sad because I have a lot of younger kids in my family now that my cousins have and whatnot. And they look forward to having the big Easter egg hunt over at my aunt's house every year. And obviously that's not going to happen. So it sucks, but I think in the long run, everybody's going to be better without, scrounge around the yard picking up dirty eggs.
Right. Yeah. More than especially having all those little kids and older adults in the same area at the same time.
Coughing everywhere, the good stuff.
Well, the good news is that we may be, luckily we have people like our guests that are out there actively trying to fix that problem. So rather than continuing to extend the quarantine, hopefully at some point we'll be able to actually treat the damn thing.
Nip it in the butt.
Exactly, which will be super helpful and useful. But today we have another member of the Distributed Bio team. He actually is more heavily involved with the engineering of the specific antibodies that we're going to be using to try to fight COVID. So rather than kind of the overarching epidemiology and some of the other ideas that you've heard from other guests up to this point, this one is actually going to be, I think, super interesting from the scientific side on the actual engineering and re-engineering of SARS antibodies as they try to cross-bind them over to COVID-19 and effectively neutralize the virus. So today we're going to have the privilege of interviewing Shahrad Daraeikia. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me, guys.
And why don't we just start with, where you're from, and you can start wherever you'd like.
Well, I am from Tehran, Iran, originally. I was born there and spent about 5 years of my childhood life there. So I still have a lot of family over there, and I know they're dealing heavily with this corona outbreak as well over there. Things are almost as bad there as they are here stateside. And they have a much older population as well that is taking a huge hit because of the virus outbreak. Um, Shortly after, I was about 5 years old when I moved to the States in '98 and did all my schooling here stateside in Washington, D.C., just about in the suburbs area. And from a very early start, I really liked science. I think all the science classes we did in elementary school, middle school were the ones that really grabbed my interest the most and really helped me engage with everything. It also helped me learn English that way as well. So a lot of my vocabulary is very scientific heavy because that's how I learned most of my English. And from there, going into college, I knew I wanted to be a science major. I think I started off as pre-med, and we did a couple animal dissections in lab freshman year. And as soon as I saw the blood, I realized it's not a path I want to continue on. I kind of changed majors almost immediately there and went more into the chemistry field because there was less blood, less guts, honestly, and it worked out pretty well. So here we only deal with like clear liquids and very small amounts of bacteria at my work. So I think I'm gone down the right path and not becoming squeamish at work, which is really nice. And then I think the biggest turning point for why I chose the industry I picked was that it was towards the end of my college career. I was going to graduate in maybe 4 months, and I was sitting down with my buddy who was doing biomedical engineering. And I asked him at the time when I was doing my pharmacy prep to go into pharmacy school, I asked him, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, but I can't really tell my parents because I don't have a backup plan yet. And then he told me about the emerging field, biotechnology and these biosimilars and how they're engineering actual live proteins to be used as drugs instead of small molecules, which are your more traditional pills that you tend to get at the pharmacy and stuff. And I thought it was really interesting, so I did some research and realized that this sounds like a really cool and promising field. And then I applied for grad school in San Francisco at USF shortly after. Their deadline was rapidly approaching. So while I was prepping to take my senior finals, I was also studying for the GRE. So I could take that and be able to apply on time. And I was fortunate enough to get into a 2-year master's program in biotechnology at USF. And that kind of snowballed into where I am now. As I'm not sure if Jake has mentioned, he does work closely with the students in this program at USF. And I became an intern for him through this program.
You said so the students in his program at USF?
Jake works closely with the program itself. So he, over the semesters, he gives the students projects to do through the USF Biotech program while he's working at Distributed Bio. And from there, if you tend to do a good job on the projects and you do stand out, he pulls you in as an intern at Distributed Bio. And from being an intern, you are given more responsibilities and tasks within the company. And, if he likes your work and he likes the results you're producing, he'll bring you in as a full-time scientist.
Gotcha. So with your kind of your high school experience, I kind of want to rewind a little bit and go through kind of that push from science to pre-med, kind of that transition period and everything. So we interviewed a gentleman named Shwaiz Bahati a while back, and he actually went into school. I think that he was pre-med to start because basically his parents were like, his entire life were like, you're going to go be a doctor. This is what we want you to do.
No questions asked.
Yeah. And then he ended up kind of actually taking a complete pivot and ended up, I think he's at Arizona State, ASU right now, pursuing his master's in human engineering. So it's like user experience psychology. They're mixing the psychological side of end user experience. So he's helping people create these beautiful platforms and understanding like what happens when a person looks at a door handle. What does that mean? Why do we innately know as humans to turn it at this point? How do we structure these kinds of things psychologically in order to engage people? But it was a really tough pivot and a tough shift for him because, like you said, he didn't have a backup plan at first. He knew that he didn't want to do what he wanted to do, but he had to kind of shift. So your like senior year of high school going into pre-med, kind of what was going through your mind. And then the second half of it will be when you decided to make that switch, how did that situation kind of play out in your head slash actually interacting with the people that you care about and making that transition?
Well, I think the pre med transition or wanting to go into pre med was it was partially pressure, from parents and the rest of the family. When you come from kind of like a third generation immigrant family, they always want the children to always kind of go into very respectable fields or fields that are more of the scientific nature, whether if it's a doctor or a scientist or an engineer of some sort. So there was a lot of pressure, but I had also made a few mistakes in my past in high school. I wasn't the best kid. So going to pre-med and kind of satisfying my parents' requirements was more of a redemption thing for me to show them that, I have made some mistakes, but I can redeem myself and do kind of what you want of me and go above and beyond and kind of change my life around a little bit. But what ended up happening is that I had, put all my eggs in one basket to go into pre-med. And, the first few semesters of really diving into like dissection labs and stuff, things that I didn't really do in high school, were kind of presented to me in college. And I kind of really from early on realized that just wasn't for me. I wasn't a big fan of doing dissections and getting into the guts and all the blood and stuff. Now I kind of knew this was something I had to get over if I wanted to pursue a medical career. So I did fight it. I did kind of just try to push through it. But after a while, I realized there's only so much of this I can put up with and not have it, make me not do or just not like what I want to do in the future. My biggest fear was to be stuck with something that ultimately was going to be something I didn't enjoy career-wise.
Right.
So over the years, I made changes to go to a pharmacy program. And so I, worked at a pharmacy for a couple of years. And that kind of also made me lose interest a little bit. And again, it was all in a way to just make sure that, my parents were happy with me and that I go to a career that they would kind of be proud of, as any like immigrant parent would want. I think the pressure was definitely there.
So when you decided, okay, I am in this pharmacy program, my friend is talking about this biotechnology field, this emerging field of like synergistic marrying of engineering and science. What were some of the initial thoughts going through your head when you're like, oh, I'm going to pivot again? I've already been through one pivot. How am I going to go about approaching this second one?
It was tough. I think it was a time factor since, college was wrapping up in about 3.5 months and I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And then again, having to tell my parents that, hey, I don't think I'm going to do, this pharmacy route, because what had happened was I really got into it, loving the chemistry side of it. I was always good at chemistry and organic chemistry in college. And I figured, a lot of the pharmaceutical sides going to a pharmacy program would help me kind of expand on those skills that I had and that love for chemistry. But it became a very monotonous thing, and I didn't really get the pleasure that I was hoping to get. It was more of interacting with customers and stuff at a pharmacy counter, and that's just not something I wanted to do for the rest of my life or for the foreseeable future. But my friend talking up of these biotech molecules and these cool proteins that you can engineer to treat cancer and Alzheimer's and viruses, I'm like, that's what I want to do. I don't want to be behind a counter just giving people the medication. I want to be in the lab building that medicine, working on it.
It's no different than sales. You're basically it's a sales position, so I can understand that. And
sure, yeah.
From personal experience, going to pick up scripts, no one is friendly when they're there to come and get a script from somebody.
Yeah,
everybody's sick and grumpy.
Exactly. Yeah. And the people behind the counter, you may not notice, they're just overworked all the time. You're standing on your feet for 8+ hours a day dealing with, like you said, grumpy, angry customers, and the lines get long. And it was just, it kind of took the pleasure out of it for me working at a pharmacy,
Absolutely.
unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
The drug mart by us, the where I get all my scripts filled and stuff like that. That dude behind that counter just looks miserable 95% of the time. And he's, like you said, he is constantly running back to this computer, checking the shelf over here, going and grabbing stuff off the back. He never stops.
Yeah. And, you have to do 4 years of pretty rigorous schooling to do what he's doing. And I thought, if I'm going to spend that amount of time and money and effort in school,
might as well enjoy it.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to come out of it enjoying what I do. Like, I want to be kind of excited when I go into work every day and just give it everything I have rather than, feeling miserable.
Yeah. I mean, there's
completely understandable.
There's a reason why I'm shifting my career path and sitting full time behind a microphone and doing media consulting rather than the nursing profession. I love nursing. I'm not trying to get on that at all.
He loves wiping butts.
And okay, that is, yeah. But I've been doing it now almost 2 years as an ICU float nurse, and I kind of have this perception that I try to really impart on new nurses when they're coming in. And I'm not saying that I'm a veteran nurse by any means, but I've been around the block at least a couple of times where I say, listen, this is a career that you cannot survive in if you're not passionate about it. This is the type of career that you're going to deal with reviving somebody and then telling you to F off because you ruined their high, or, dealing with somebody whose patient comes in that wanted to be DNR, but the family member that was the POA wanted them to be saved. And now you're dealing with that type of ethical scenario, unhappy family members. Nobody ever really comes to the hospital happy, ever, really. Except for maybe the labor and delivery nurses get to experience that every now and then. But understanding that internally is key when you enter that job field. And I tell all of those nurses that because I'm like, listen, there are so many things that you can do with a nursing degree. I know people that are salespeople. I know nurses that are consultants. I know nurses that are now teachers. There's so many different places that you can go into with that RN degree. As long as you have it in your possession, you can do so many different things with it. But I think a lot of times people think when they get to the end of college, they're like, okay, I have this 4-year degree. It's in this specific field. I need to go into this field because I have a pre-pharmacy degree. So I need to become a pharmacist. Did you deal with that type of stigma or anything when you made that switch and you're like, I'm a pre-pharmacy person, but I'm going to go pursue my master's in biotechnology?
Well, I think there was a lot of worry because I had made a shift so late into college. Most people who, change majors maybe do it their first year or two. But I had done it maybe 3 months before graduation. So there was a little bit of a fear of, well, now you have to wait a whole nother year before you can get into a program because my undergrad degree would not have set me up for a job that I'm doing today. And I knew that. So I had to, get everything in order to get into a grad program that would accept me with the undergrad degree that I had. And at the time that I was applying, that would set me up for a job in this industry. So there was, I was very nervous that, I would be probably working at the pharmacy for another year until I can get into a grad program, or that I might not get into a grad program in order to pursue this. But I think I kind of just blocked everything out for a couple months around that graduation time and really studied for my GREs, sent out a lot of applications, and just did what I could to do my best and set myself up to make that change. And I kind of told myself this is going to be the last kind of shift I can make regarding what I want to do for the near future. Without it, severely setting me back a couple of years, especially after, college isn't cheap anymore these days. So people do spend a lot of money going through 4 years of an undergrad. And as someone who had to kind of finance that on their own through loans and grants, I didn't want those 4 years that I, paid the money and went to class to be a waste. So I wanted to make sure that kind of at least pushed me into a direction I wanted. So it was a few months of just buckling down and kind of avoiding all distractions and making sure I can set myself to get in somewhere that could put me into the biotech industry.
Right. Now, when you made it to grad school, what was that feeling was like when you arrived on campus and you realized, okay, now this isn't just an idea. This isn't a thought in my head. I am actually doing it. this is what I am now. This is what I'm going to pursue.
I thought it was amazing. I went from living in Virginia to San Francisco in the matter of like a month, and everything had changed. In San Francisco, things are very heavily focused around, tech and biotech. And I did feel, while it was exhilarating to be in a new place, I did feel a little out of place at first. And I felt a little behind because so many people knew so much about biotech here, especially my peers in the program. So I had to do a lot of my own research just to get caught up with everything. In terms of what the scene was like, and what companies are out here and what the latest work that is being done in the industry. So it was a bit of a learning curve, I believe, the first year, but it was a really good experience the whole way through.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I was kind of predicting that that's the way that it would play out when you got there. Is that a lot of the times the biggest learning curve, I think, is adjusting from knowing that you went from Virginia to California. I feel like intellectually, from the schooling perspective, the schooling is the least amount of adjustment, because if you're pre-programmed to learn, like if you've been teaching yourself over the years how to learn something, you can apply those types of principles to pretty much any subject and learn that subject, especially if you're passionate about it. But when you switch locations like that, that can be a completely different ball game when you're having to adapt to the area. And like you said, the companies, who's doing what does the political landscape look like? What type of research is being done out here? What are the opportunities now that I'm in this major? And that, led you down the path, obviously, to ending up at distributed bio. So why don't we talk about the first time that you ever met Jake or anybody from DBio?
Sure. It was, like I mentioned, Jake does a lot of projects with the biotech program at USF. So in our second year, we had a collaboration with Distributed Bio where some of the USF students in my program, we were working on projects that Jake had assigned. And what would happen is that either Jake or somebody else from the company would come in and bring in the materials into the lab, and we would work on the protocol that he would set out for us. So the first time I'd ever met Jake was when he came into our classroom, into the lab. It was about 7 p.m. at night because these were all late afternoon and night classes. So we do school from about 5 in the afternoon till about 11 at night, 3 days a week. So I saw him late at night, and I briefly spoke to him about the protocol and the experiment that we were running for him. And kind of immediately off the bat, I could tell he was a very, very intellectual person. He knew he was just talking about things that I had never even heard of. And that's not to say that that's what made him smart, but you can tell that the way he would just talk about things, even our professors were kind of just fixated on what he was saying and then talking about the project and the overall goal of the project. So it was a combination, I think, of his intellect and his ability to grab a room when he's talking, and that is in part due to the fact that he's a very brilliant guy and he just approaches things out of the box. And I even went up and mentioned to him that the project we were doing for him was very out of the box. It wasn't like our standard lab technique stuff that we've learned. It was a little bit of manipulation and thinking in ways where we can get better results by reducing the amount of extra work put in. And, he's always very optimistic about taking risks because he thinks that kind of stepping back and doing things the normal way constantly is not the best way. And innovation is always led by taking risks. And this is kind of the first communication that I had with him. And from then on, I'm like, it'd be really cool to get to work with this guy more and more. And I was fortunate enough to have that happen eventually.
Now, I was actually just talking to Jake about this yesterday. I think that it's extremely interesting the way that he said that he selects the interns or the people that come in to work at DBio and everything else like that. And I think that I may be paraphrasing here, but yesterday he said that every single one of the people that he's brought into the company has a specific storyline that adds to Distributed Bio's capabilities. And so kind of diving down this storyline, it's interesting to me the type of background that you originally kind of came from that you're switched over to because of the heavy pre-pharmacy kind of background and that area. I was actually in the Air National Guard for 6.5 years. And one of the things that we talk about in the Air National Guard is how cool it is to have a Guard member that may have one job in the military, but then civilian side be something completely separate. So, like, I'll use myself as an example. Obviously, civilian side, I do marketing communications, and then I was an ICU nurse, right? I went to school for nursing and clinical psychology. But in the military, I did human resources and intelligence. So I was able to bring that critical thinking skills and like the decisiveness of nursing into the human resources field and kind of renovate and optimize some programs there because I was able to approach things from an outside of the box perspective. And I think that Jake is very strategic about bringing those people in that have that outside of the box type of mentality, like you said, because that's just what distributed bio is. It's ingrained into your guys' culture at this point.
Right. And I just, he kind of brands us as, like a rebel biotech company. Now, that's not to say that we break the rules when we're doing stuff. We follow all of the safety precautions and everything in the lab, but we like to do things a little differently when it comes to the same experiments that other people have tried. Jake thinks that, there's always room for innovation. And one thing we have at the company, we tell, everybody is that if you think that a protocol or a project or, an aspect of the company that can work better or be done easier or can be done more efficiently, then you should bring that to the attention of everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're like an entry-level intern or just an associate, or if you're a senior scientist. He's always looking for feedback from everyone on how to make things go more efficiently or just, get better results depending on what we're doing at the time.
Yeah. And that's actually something super interesting from just like a leadership perspective, that sometimes the best ideas tend to not come from the executive with 2 different degrees and all this other kind of stuff. It's from the person that just entered the organization with no prior knowledge of how things operate, that are actively have boots on the ground doing processes that, that executive hasn't been involved in directly for years potentially. And now they come in with a fresh objective set of eyes and want to bring something up. And it's important to make sure that that culture is ingrained inside of a company, that they feel comfortable enough to bring that up in order to optimize results. Otherwise, you're missing out on hundreds of potential ideas if you make it feel like, oh, you have to be of a certain rank in order to bring that type of stuff up. So
exactly. And every month.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, going off of what you just said, we do this thing every Monday where we have pretty much the entire company come together for about an hour and a half long meeting where we go through all of our projects. And it's an open table for discussion where we troubleshoot different projects and present ideas on how to make things better if some project isn't working or how we can speed things up. And everybody in the company joins this, whether they're on different teams, if they're just interns, or if it's even the C-levels. Everyone just kind of comes together. And we do this once a week. So it's a really good open table program for everyone to get their voices heard and to kind of have feedback on what's going on.
Right. So you ended up making the transition over to DBio because Jake brought you on initially as an intern. After you guys met during that initial encounter, obviously you had to have landed the internship position. So what was your first position at DBio?
So my first position was an intern. I started out being like a support role for a lot of different engineering projects at the company. Our current director of engineering, who was a senior scientist at the time, pulled me aside maybe like the first or second week of my internship there and asked me to help him, engineer this new antibody library that we were working on. And I was, a little taken aback at first because I didn't have much experience in engineering. And for him to come and ask me to give him support and help him, it was kind of eye-opening. And it was really appreciated for him to ask me of that. So I worked with him very closely over a course of a few months during my internship. And he's the one who kind of really opened my eyes to how much I enjoyed the antibody engineering aspect of biotech. Because he was very brilliant and he was a great teacher. So after that, I kind of, I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay at DBio after my internship or go to another company. But after spending time working on these libraries with our director, it kind of really pushed me to stay as long as I could. And I was very grateful that they offered me a full-time position afterwards.
So your full-time position now is titled what?
I am a scientist. And you start off as an associate scientist after becoming an intern. And from there, you get promoted depending on the quality of work and how much you're able to take on, and as well as your leadership abilities within the company.
Gotcha. So what are your roles currently as a scientist associated with DBio?
I lead all of the antibody maturation and optimization programs, which essentially means we take a starting antibody that's given to us by a client, or if we have one internally, and I'm able to engineer a library from that one starting antibody to make billions of different variants. And we can screen and test all of those different variants to see if we can get an optimized version of that one starting antibody. And in addition to other engineering projects like building full antibody libraries using human RNA from the memory and naive compartments. That's where the term or superhuman library comes from, is that it's a mix of human optimized antibodies in addition with computationally optimized software analysis to pick out the best antibodies to include. So I'm very much on the engineering side of things. I have given my hand in like mammalian cell culture work and stuff, but I always get, my interest keeps getting pulled back to the engineering side.
So if you were to walk us through like a very basic synopsis of what engineering an antibody and optimizing it actually looks like, don't be afraid to use technical language and stuff at this point. What exactly does that look like?
Sure. So it's we know that an antibody has these very specific binding domains called CDRs. And these CDRs live in a heavy chain of the antibody and the light chain as well. So you need both chains for the antibody to work properly in a humanized version. So we take the 3 CDRs in the heavy chain and the 3 CDRs in the light chain. And these CDRs are just residues of amino acids that find binding to different proteins in the body, whether it's a receptor expressed on a cancer cell line, or it's like an interleukin, or something that exists within the blood-brain barrier. You can engineer these CDRs within the antibody, the binding domains, to bind specifically to almost any protein within the human body and have some kind of an effect, whether it's blocking that receptor from having any function or by activating that receptor to have a signal cascade function through the body. So what we do is we take these CDRs and we modulate the amino acid composition at every position. And we end up making billions and billions of different variants with these 6 different combinations across those 6 CDRs. And so that gives rise to a unique antibody whenever you have these very specific combination of CDRs. And each one of those binds differently to a target, or it can bind to a different target altogether.
So the goal is essentially to create as many different variants as possible, and then pray to God that one of those has affinities and works properly and actually connects.
Exactly.
But you're using kind of the computational side to augment the human side and trying to predict which ones are going to work correctly. Does that sound?
Exactly. Yeah. So Jake's done a lot of research on, what CDRs are very present in human germlines. We believe that having very human-looking CDRs and scaffolds will, work as better therapeutics down the line. One, because, if you take an antibody that you've made and it binds to a target and it looks like it's like a mouse antibody, or it looks more like a rat or a monkey antibody, and you try putting that into humans, well, then you're just going to have a huge problem. You're going to have some kind of immunogenicity problem where the immune system will begin to attack itself because of this foreign antibody that just doesn't look human. So what Jake has done, he's eliminated that in a lot of the designs of the libraries. And when we go to build libraries, we think about all that stuff too. So we're introducing scaffolds, which are essentially the pieces that keep the CDRs together. They're kind of like, if you will, like the framework or the foundations for holding the CDRs in the places that they're held together. So even those we try to keep looking very human, introduce very little mutations within them, so that when they are initially introduced into a human biological system, the immune system and then the body just doesn't shut down as a result. So we like to think about all this stuff way in advance before we even begin designing a library. And through a lot of algorithms that Jake and Distributed Bio have designed, we can search the human repertoire to see what CDRs are most present within each individual human, and then those we know are like the CDRs that work the best. So we can incorporate those within the library as well.
So when you put a batch together and whatnot, how many are you hoping actually, like, what's a good number that come back as like, okay, these are working or positive? Because I'm assuming with the amount that you're doing, getting one is kind of like,
Exactly. It also depends what kind of library we build. So if we take, if we're doing an optimization program where we take one antibody that we know binds to target X and we just want to make it bind tighter, come off slower and, be more thermostable, we'll make a library around that one. Now, essentially, more than 50% of those members within that library should still bind, but hopefully bind to a higher degree. Now, if we're taking, our generic library that we use for all of our discovery that can, be panned against whatever target, we typically see a hit rate of, a couple hundred or so out of a billion or so members. And it also depends, how complicated that target is as well. Some proteins are just innately very difficult to work with. They have an epitope that might be very small for that antibody to actually interact with. So it's very depending on what target or what protein you're looking for. But thankfully, the way these libraries have been designed and built, we do see a good amount of hits coming out of the other end. But more so for the optimization programs, we do like to see at least 50% working for the library.
Gotcha.
And that's something that I don't think a lot of people understand when it comes to engineering these solutions and stuff like that, is the sheer volume of possibilities that you have to kind of
how much you have to physically collect and test against one another. I mean, there's a lot.
Absolutely. So we do this thing called panning, which essentially means we take our library and we expose it to the protein we want to find binders for, and we do 4 iterations of that to get those library members as close to binding to that one protein as possible. And after the 4 iterations, we end up with about maybe 1,000 or so clones, like individual antibodies that we then start screening for. So we go from that pool of 1,000, we sequence them and see which ones look the best. And from there, we jump down to maybe 700-ish or so. And we start screening those on either a kinetics instrument where we're directly introducing that antibody to the protein once again to see if there is binding and to what degree. Or we could take those antibodies and screen them on cells that contain that receptor or that protein and see if there's binding to the cell as well. So we're talking about in the numbers of hundreds of clones that we screen for a particular protein program.
Dang.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm assuming that's, each one's pretty time consuming, or?
Thankfully, we've developed a lot of high throughput methods where we can, do maybe a plate of clones at a time. And when we say plate, it's about 96 clones in a 96 well plate that we can run through a cell instrument called FACS, which is the screening on the cells, or we can do that on the kinetics instrument as well. And in a day, we can get through about a couple hundred of these guys. So we have set up some ways to, help with automation and speed it up. So we're a very high throughput company because we know we have to screen a lot of clones to get the exact matches that we want. So we've taken a lot of care in our setup to make sure that we're prepped and well equipped to do so.
Cool.
Yeah, being able to just the technology and stuff like that. I was thinking about this before the interview, knowing that we were going to talk specifically about the engineering side of things and the more scientific approach, about how far we as just the human race in general have come since like Leeuwenhoek discovering the microscope and stuff like that. Just looking at penicillin bacteria and fungi and trying to grow antibiotics out of that to now using computational analysis to statistically predict antibody, you know, um, affinities and other stuff like that is just bonkers to me because that's only, that's hundreds of years that have
Correct. Yeah.
passed. Going back, we've been around for thousands of years and everything. Just the amount of technological advance when you really start to think about it in the last couple hundred years is just insane. Or not even the last couple hundred, even the last, 50 years is just absolutely insane.
Definitely. And I think, even in the next couple of decades, we could see even a greater increase in the kind of innovation and the work that's being done, because I feel the biotechnical industry has an exponential growth curve at the moment, where the more we learn and the more we discover, ultimately the more we realize we have not yet figured out. But it leads us down those avenues for us to continue to do research and to figure more things out as well. And I think in whole, the biotech industry is still quite young compared to the pharmacy industry or the small molecule industry. So I think it's got a long ways to go before it even hits the peak. And I do honestly believe it is the future of medicine at this point.
Oh yeah, I 110% agree. I think that just the biotechnology field in general right now, it's kind of like that philosophical concept of like when you know what you know and you know what you don't know, that's okay. But the key is to really know is the dangerous part are the things that you don't know. And that's what we're really like diving into right now. I feel like in the biotechnology field is like you said, it's like every door that we open, there's 6 more that we discover that we have no idea what's behind them. And we're discovering all of these things that we didn't realize that we didn't know. And kind of breaking through that barrier and actually discovering all of these new avenues and ways to combat diseases or ways to mitigate things, whether it's stem cell research or it's antibody research or it's any of these other types of things that kind of start to walk that ethical boundary, coming up in the next decade or so, what is I know the big thing right now is like CRISPR. What is the biggest like ethical battles with CRISPR? How much should we edit, or what things would we be allowed to edit and stuff like that within the human genome? And then moving into just the antibodies in general, what types of diseases are we going to be able to cure for this? What is that landscape even going to look like? Because the biotechnology field right now is working in synergy with the pharmaceutical field, but
Correct.
I kind of feel like, and this might just be my inner conspiracy theory kind of coming out, but I feel like eventually they're going to end up almost butting heads because I think that biotechnology is going to fix too many things in the next decade, and pharmacy companies are going to get pissed that biotechnology is curing a bunch of things or fixing a bunch of things, preventing a bunch of things, and now they're going to have to. That entire industry is going to shift. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we could very well see that happen. Like you said, there's going to be a time where biotech may begin to outpace what the pharmaceutical industry is capable of doing. In that situation, I see the pharmaceutical industry begin opening departments that are more biotech focused, like these big companies like Merck and GSK. I don't think they're going to just sit idly by and wait for the biotech industry to take them over. I think they're going to kind of, welcome that kind of change and incorporate it within their company as well. So I think in maybe 30, 40 years, we're not going to have solely specific pharmaceutical companies, but they'll ultimately all be biotech pharmaceutical companies. Because they have to adapt the change, or they're not going to be able to keep up with the new diseases and then the new needs that are needed by medicine at the time.
Right. Yeah, I agree. That it's going to be interesting because it's going to force a pivot, and so it'll be a disrupted industry. And one of my favorite quotes from one of the gentlemen that we actually do some consulting work with is he always says you're inside of your industry, you're either actively being disrupted or doing disrupting. And so he was like, if you sit idly by, you're probably actively being disrupted by somebody else. But if you're
Hmm.
constantly innovating, you're pushing, and you're attempting to find new things, you are the one that is trying to cause the disruption. And he was like, you always want to try to be the one that is disrupting something, not the one actively being disrupted. Um, and I think that your guys' mentality at DBio is kind of that renegade group is just we are going to be the disruptors, not the disrupted.
That's
Um,
right. We like to hope so. Yeah.
yeah, I'm curious. Actually, I'll kind of open up to RJ. RJ, is there anything on your heart or mind you've been curious about the last 5 to 10 minutes?
No, you guys both beautifully kind of explain things for me. A lot of this is above my pay grade when it comes to the scientific stuff, but no, I mean, I agree with what you said about them. They're definitely on the cutting edge of stuff and pushing things, which I think is definitely needed in a time like this. So, I know personally, and me and Jan are grateful for all the stuff that you guys are doing, especially with everything that's going on.
So now I'm curious, for people that are trying to get into this field, and I think that this is kind of, we've talked so much about COVID and all this other kind of stuff. I kind of want to end this on a different note, because I feel like we've addressed the engineering side and kind of the specifics of what that looks like relatively well. But I think that a question that's really kind of on our audience's mind right now, especially those that are the still in college, that are the science majors and other stuff like that, are how in the hell do I get involved in biotechnology or that industry in general, outside of just having a biotechnology degree as an undergrad or anything like that. You're actually kind of the perfect example to answer that question, because you were not a traditional undergraduate, and you had to kind of shift to get into that master's degree. So if you were going to give a college student that is maybe on the edge of graduation, kind of in that position that you were in, what type of advice would you go back and give yourself, moving forward, that would have eased your transition?
I would say get involved in a laboratory at your college as soon as you can. There's a lot of professors in the science department and the life sciences department. Maybe some schools even now have biotech departments. They all have labs that they're doing research out of, funded by the school or funded by various entities, and they need people to work in those labs, whether it's on a volunteer basis or you get paid a few bucks. And I'm sure a lot of college kids can use the extra money like I did. So you need to find some work. And what better way to find work is than in a lab that's going to teach you a lot of the skills you'll need for a career in biotech, or get you familiar with everything. And a lot of these professors will help you take up your own projects where you can publish papers and get your name out there. And that's honestly nowadays, that's what a lot of companies look for, is to see if you have really good, solid laboratory experience. And like if they were to throw you in the lab, you can, run a particular assay or an experiment for them, just following nothing more than a protocol. As well as, if you have your name on a paper, whether you're the first author or you're a supplementary author, that's still really good accreditation to have. And there's college students who are being put on papers nowadays, because they work in, a professor's lab, and they get credit for their work. And all that really takes is, you work or you have a science professor that you enjoy their lectures and you like what they're teaching. You reach out to them through an email and just, ask them if they need help in their lab, or if they know anybody else on campus that has lab openings, that they can become a part of. I think what I have noticed is that there are people who are they have PhDs, or they have, they went to really prestigious schools, but a lot of their skills in the laboratory fall short because they just don't have that hands-on experience. They may have just done a lot of, reading and research. But when they're put in the lab, they can't perform a lot of the basic assays and functions that are needed. And I think that there's a high demand for stuff like that right now.
Yeah, I think that there's a huge difference between an quote unquote expert and a practitioner. There's a huge difference. And you end up encountering, I think, some of these personality types that consider themselves experts, that are wholeheartedly willing to critique the way that you are currently being a active practitioner. I know we see it all the time inside of our space, just within the marketing world and podcasting and everything like that, where, we are boots on the ground, actively recording, producing shows, putting stuff out, marketing, all that other kind of stuff. And then we'll have people that read it, are either self-taught on all these different articles, or they went to school for marketing communications and everything like that, and try to critique the way that we're doing things. Like, oh, you have to have your website set up this way, or you have to have this set up this way for best practice. And well, Billy, sometimes best practice doesn't always work in the real world. So,
absolutely, yeah.
Sometimes you have to use a shoestring to hold a ET tube in someone's throat so they don't extubate themselves. We don't always have the actual strap that came with the ET tube in the ER. So sometimes you just got to hold it there and wait until supplies actually get there. But, you have to be able to get by, right?
Absolutely.
And like you said, that is a huge disconnect, which, the academics has its place. You have to have the foundation for sure. You have to have the background knowledge and understand what you're doing. But the more experience that you can have actively boots on ground doing it, the better.
Mm-hmm.
I think for sure.
Real life experience.
Exactly. That would be like RJ. You haven't seen him, I guess, but he's a 260 plus pound bodybuilder, right? He's like Mr. Ohio in 2016,
15.
Mm-hmm. But either way, like his, you wouldn't be able to get to where he's at just researching workout routines. You actually have to go in and squat super heavy.
Right.
There's actually a funny story about that. So I used to work for GNC, and I worked in one that was up near Akron, and there was a gentleman who worked at the one in Belton Village. And he was not the picture of health. Let's just put it that way. To the point where I knowingly heard people be like, how is this guy looking like that work at GNC? And the reason being is he had like 2 or 3 master's degrees in like exercise science and a whole bunch of other stuff. And the issue being is he never put it to practice. He could not get people to come and hire him as a personal trainer or this and that or whatever, because he never attempted to do it. He had all the knowledge. He had everything he'd ever need, more than I even have when it comes to weightlifting and training and dietary stuff right now. But he could not put it into practice for himself, and thus nobody trusted him to put it in practice for them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you should be the first person you invest in, especially with all that knowledge. And if,
100%,
like you said, if people don't see it, you're doing it for yourself, they're not going to expect you to do it for them either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that there's a post that I wrote not too long ago called "Do You Trust Yourself?" And it was like basically telling people no one is going to trust you if you don't trust yourself. And what I meant by that was we set goals for ourselves a lot. People said you hear all of this talk. You need to set macro goals. You need to set long-term and short-term goals, daily goals. You should take time minute by minute, yada, yada, yada. There's all these bullshit leadership guru, how to optimize, all this other kind of stuff. You can find endless amounts of research on it. But a lot of times people get so caught up in reading all of the research that they think that reading the research is them bettering themselves, which isn't the case. I can listen to 50 leadership podcasts a day and be like, yes, I was really accomplished today because I listened to 50 different episodes on how to implement leadership tactics. But then if I go back into my job and I'm still a crappy leader, it doesn't make a difference. You have these, you have to be able to cross over that barrier, which I think is pivotal in pretty much any job field. But if you set a goal and you don't follow through on it yourself, you're going to distrust yourself because now you've lied to yourself. And psychologically, that's just going to stack up. And so if you set something as simple as like, I'm going to wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning to eat breakfast, and then you hit the snooze button and don't wake up till 9:30, you've now subtly told yourself that you're okay with not following through. And now the way that you present yourself to the world over time, it's going to end up being this person says this and then they do this.
Mm-hmm.
And like being that beautiful mixture of academics and actual being a practitioner and following through on things just does nothing but build your reputation over time, which it's done wonders for the way that you approach your process and where you are in life currently. I mean, starting out not being the degree that you ended up in for your master's, deciding to pivot multiple times in school, ending up at the master's, getting an internship with Jake, even though you weren't like you felt behind, quote unquote, when you first got there, and you still ended up getting the internship at DBio and are now running an entire section of their engineering program for the antibodies as a scientist. You know, it's because, well, actually, I don't know if it's because, you can tell me if it is, but I'm guessing that it's because you set these things for yourself once that snowball started rolling and actually followed through on them and gained that trust in yourself.
For sure. I think, having a goal that you can actually accomplish is, little goals at a time, things that you can knock out within a year or so that you kind of set yourself up to where you want to be are extremely important. But it also takes, you got to have that, like you were talking about, the drive to actually get it done and put it into practice. Because a goal on paper is, it's just kind of like a dream or a wish. I think it actually becomes a goal when you actually start working towards achieving it. And there's going to be, like, I had my fair share of setbacks doing all this. Before any of this started, I worked for a couple other companies where things didn't pan out. I had some really crappy bosses. And, in order to make the move out to San Francisco, I pretty much sold everything I owned, my car and everything, just so I had money for rent and for travel and for the move. So there was several points where I felt like these goals would not be achieved because I was having, I kept getting knocked down and the adjustment was so difficult. And I really had nothing really left to my name at the moment. So I just kept pushing a little bit more and trying to see if I can get what I wanted from everything that I'd already invested into coming out and pursuing this industry. And I think at the end of the day, everyone can make excuses, but you have to put in the work. You just have to, put your head down and get the job done, whether it involves working late nights and weekends, like a lot of people at my company do. Hard work is what honestly gets you to where you want to be, I think. And that's kind of how I approach most of the goals I set out for myself.
I couldn't have said it better at all. I think that, I don't even have anything to add.
Well said, my friend.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, we'll kind of end this with the revert. Do you have any questions for us as far as me and RJ or anything like that? I know that you probably have heard a little bit about us, at least now that we've interviewed so many people from DBio, but.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What is your guys' take on this whole COVID and the way we as, I guess, a global society are dealing with it and reacting to it?
Okay.
In terms
you want
of,
to go first, RJ? Or you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
So my whole take on it, just from like the being an ICU nurse, and so my position as a float nurse requires me to be certified on all the ICUs plus be able to work in the ER. So I have lately been working a lot more in the ER, obviously, because of the influx of patients down there. What I've honestly really seen is kind of the opposite of what I think people were expecting. At first there was a lot of divide, there was a lot of uneasiness, there was a lot of political BS, and there's still that thing, but I think that the overwhelming majority of people that, at least that I've witnessed, whether it's at the hospital or it's on these Facebook groups that we put up or it's in the news reels and everything like that, I think that it's forcing us to take a step back and actually connect human to human again, whether it's through technology or anything else. But, there's a Facebook group that we came up with for our county that I think has close to 4,500 people in it. And it's literally nothing but people volunteering to deliver groceries to old people or putting up food resources or like one of the other gentlemen that
relevant news.
Yeah. One of the other gentlemen that is in our incubator for like the tech space that we are in came up with an entire website to help Local restaurants put on their carry-out menus to make it easy for people to go since we're on lockdown. And it's been amazing watching all of the different people dedicate time, money, resources, whatever they have to make sure that the community survives. That's been kind of my biggest take. And I think that mentality expands out into kind of the global perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's good that everyone is actually coming together in a time where I think even up until this, everyone was so divided. Like you said, politically and socially, it's nice to see everyone coming together to help each other out. I think we're making the best of this scenario.
Agreed.
I've seen a lot of the same stuff too. A lot of people just kind of going out of their way. I hate to say it, but I went to go pick up food. Everybody, I think because everybody's locked in their house, but everybody seems a little bit more friendly when you see them in person, and got into a nice conversation. I was picking up Mexican food the other night, and the guy opened the doors for me and sat there and talked. He's like, yeah, it was a good day. Went and checked on my parents and this and that. I'm like, wow, I just said hi. Everybody's desperate to talk to people, which is nice because I'm a person who loves social interaction. I mean, half of my gym workout is me just talking to people. So
he's not lying,
and that's because I see them every in and out every day, Monday through Friday, pretty much. So I've even got people from the gym now that are texting me. They're like, hey, how you holding up? Like, I'm all right. What about you? So it is very heartwarming to see that stuff. I also see a lot of people just getting back into things that they're passionate about because they're forced to sit around the house and they don't have to worry about going here or going there or going to their job or going to their significant other's house. There's people that I never knew liked video games that I see posting stuff on Facebook like, oh, hey, just busted out the GameCube, gonna go back and play because I've got nothing better to do. Or people who are now getting into hobbies and stuff that you would never have expected them to want to be a part of. So it's kind of nice. Like you see more of a human aspect, a more intimate side to a lot of people because they still want that social interaction, but they're forced to be just by themselves. So it's all over the internet now, all over Instagram, all over Facebook, Twitter, whatever it may be. So it's nice. And I think everybody's I think when all of this is said and done, everybody is going to be very excited to see one another again, actually face to face, and maybe people will be a little bit more grateful for a lot of things and walk around happier, which I could definitely be excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all waiting for that day to come, hopefully sooner rather than later. I know people are getting extremely cooped up in their apartments and homes and
cabin fever.
Yeah, definitely. We think it would hit this hard. We're like, oh, we have a TV, we have our cell phones, we'll be okay. But like you said, that level of human interaction is gone. And we didn't think how hard it would really affect us. But hopefully we can come out of this, like you said, more grateful when we do have an opportunity to interact with people closer in a physical
space. It's either that or people are going to go buck wild. It's going to be a friggin' mess.
Yeah, that could happen.
M-Bar around here will just never close down. It'll be just 24-hour party after party. Like, I'm never going back home.
Yeah, and then we end up there's like one pseudo-infected person that's left. And
it all starts over again.
Yeah, I'm going to knock on wood because hopefully we're not listening to this episode 6 months from now looking at a resurgence because we were all partying.
Yeah, everybody go out of their house sparingly, not everybody at once. Every other household gets to leave.
Oh, man. All right. Well, Shahrad, thanks for coming on and dealing with our technical issues here at the beginning.
Thanks for spending your time with us this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, guys. And I appreciate all the work you are doing and getting some exposure out to everybody about this virus.
Absolutely.
And stuff.
Yeah, no problem. We'll leave a little sneak peek at the end of this episode, but there's going to be a lot more content coming from Distributed Bio in the future. So keep your ears open. I think if I whisper, it counts as just like a trailer.
There you go.
Announcement. That's the official teaser right there, is using the whisper tone.
I know we our listeners and me and Jan and all that, we thank you for all your guys' hard work that you're putting in to try and figure this virus out.
Of course, we're just doing our part. And I think we're at a position where we can do something about it. Like, I know everyone's not in a lab where they have the ability to work on stuff like this, but because we are, we're trying to do our part. As so are the nurses, so are everybody else on the front lines, the police officers, fire department workers, all the people in grocery stores and restaurants that are keeping things going, and even you guys who are just getting the word out to people. I think, and honestly, even the people who are just staying home, everyone's trying to just do their part to make sure we can
do what you can.
Yeah, I think that's all we have.
Even if it's just sitting on your couch.
That's right. Who would have thought that's what it would come to? Yeah. But no complaints there. But it's good to see everyone doing their part and giving what they can to get through this.
Yeah, I agree. Well, so with that, if you want to learn more about Shahrad, you can go ahead and go to distributedbio.com. You will find his wonderful persona on the leadership team board. You can click on his LinkedIn page there and learn more about him and Distributed Bio as a whole. If you want to learn about the Centivax project, you can also find that on the Distributed Bio website. And there's actually a way to subscribe to all of their COVID-19 updates now directly from their website's page. So you just check that out. You can subscribe to all of the updates and be one of the first people to be notified if there's anything that changes. So with that, I hope that everybody continues having a great quarantine, that you find things that you're passionate about and you continue to try to better yourself, even though we're stuck in our houses. And until next time,
stay sane
at Apex.